Logically, we can't redefine God, because ultimately God is who God is. God defines us.
Greetings everyone and welcome to our podcast, SJV podcast. This is our first podcast this year. So in this podcast we'll be thought digesting into a spiritual, theological and philosophical topics. And as you know, I'm not alone. I'm with my co-host, Brother James Treke, and I go by the name of Brother Gabriel Safafe. And we have the most spectacular visitor ever. Our bishop, our former rector of John Vianney, Bishop John Masilo Silimela. Bishop, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much, and also I greet those who are listening as well.
So before we can start, we'd like to ask you, Bishop, how are you doing? How is the bishop doing?
No, the bishop is doing well, as you see. Life, it's fine. You know, there isn't any extraordinary event in terms of in the life of the bishop. Is the same like anyone else. You wake up, you pray, and then you eat, and you go. Life goes on. So I am well.
Oh, that's good, Bishop. And now I'd like to give Brother James to introduce the topic of today.
Thank you very much, Kev. Thank you very much. You know, I thought that the bishops are cruising nicely, you know. I thought that the bishop would tell us that, you know, sometimes he's elevated from the bed or the breakfast just comes and, you know, I thought I always imagined the life of a bishop, you know. Not that I'm anticipating anything, don't put words in my mouth, but we're very glad to have the bishop today, our former rector, Bishop John Silimela. Bao, we are so glad that you are here. We are always happy to see your face, especially when you visit the seminary. I'm sure many seminarians, even including formators, have come to you maybe privately to say that, you know, the respect we give you, it's unexplainable. Today, I want us to focus on the number of things, you know. We are here in our studios, Gab, you know, we are launching also our studios today, not only welcoming the bishop, the former rector. We are also launching this wonderful studio of SJV, Seminary Studio, here in Pretoria, Waterkloof, in South Africa. So we are very, very welcomed in this studio of ours. As you said also, Gab, that this is our very first podcast. We should make it exciting for the viewers there, especially for the Catholics who are asking a number of questions about their faith, especially now. Today we're celebrating Good Friday, one of the apex celebrations in our faith. Bishop, without going any further, you know, I want us to deal with the topic of redefining God. Especially in the modern times, you know, we have struggles, different struggles, and we have misconceptions. People are losing faith. People are doubting the existence of God. Today, as I said, we are celebrating Good Friday. How can we mingle this Good Friday with the sufferings that we are seeing in the world? You may think of Congo, you may think of the Gaza Strip war, think of the Israeli attacking the people of Palestine. You may think of people of Haiti. You know, there are riots everywhere in the world, Bishop. Precisely here in South Africa, people are hungry, people are unemployed, there's corruption in government, you know, people are crying to the church. How can, Bishop, is it relevant to question God in these matters or even challenging?
Well, it is a very interesting question that you are raising. One could, you know, philosophically talk about redefining God, which is possibly one of those things that we talk about philosophically. But theologically, we can't redefine God,
Okay.
Because ultimately God is who God is. God defines us, as the source and origin of, everything. Perhaps the question we can look at is to zoom into the question of human suffering, and then how that can be reconciled in a way with the Christian faith. Because this is where we have to begin asking, does the Christian faith offer us answers, in the weight of human suffering? Does a suffering God actually attract people? Does suffering in itself, have, space within the Christian faith? Because if you look at many of us today, we want a God who does not suffer. We want, if I want to put it bluntly, we want a prosperous God.
Okay.
A God who makes us feel that we are on top of everything. We do not have challenges. We do not have problems. We are not facing difficulties economically and otherwise. We do not get sick.
We are cruising nicely, Bishop.
Yeah, we are cruising nicely. If you want to put it that way, we are cruising nicely and there is nothing. But would this kind of a God be a real, God? And would this kind of a God also be consonant with the God who has become human? Who has become human, who became fragile, who also participated in the life of each and every day person that we know, like Jesus in the incarnation tells us the story that God is capable, of coming down to the human levels of humanity, participating in the course and the journey of our own life, and also making, our life different, basically from the fact that, he is human. So he knows how we are suffering. So if you want to, follow some of the theologians who wrote also in the past, to say that, God suffered, you could actually really, take it that way. But suffering is something that should be viewed both negatively and positively.
Bishop, just to cut you today, we are talking about a God who's to suffer with us, a God who chose to be with us, basically. Now, this brings me, Gab, to another kind of a perspective. There's evil, there's suffering. Why would God, Bishop, allow? I'm sure there are many people out there. Maybe some have heard of God, some haven't. That's a relevant one. Evil and suffering. Why would good people, Bishop, in our days? There's a young person out there who's applying in universities and wherever, trying to get school, get job. That kind of a suffering. They are doing good. They are doing good. They are doing well. Let's look at that, Bishop.
Yeah, perhaps the first thing that we need to begin with is to acknowledge that there is human suffering, and then there are people who are participating in human suffering. And that these people are also, as to say, suffering through the process, of participating in issues that are difficult and then that make their life unbearable. Yeah, and of course, one would look at God and say, what kind of a God allows human beings, to encounter suffering without any form of reprieve? And yet we define God as loving, compassionate, presence, caring, understanding. Now, how do we reconcile these two worlds? Yeah, God created us in his own image and likeness. And that image and likeness means that you and I are simply more and more like God in every way, except that we are not divine. So there is in each one of us some sort of a divine imprint in us. But the second point is that God did not create us as robots.
Okay.
Yeah, so if God would have created us as robots or traffic lights, God would hold a remote somewhere there. And God will begin to press when you're going. So at the heart of human suffering, there is also an element of human freedom. Because there are sufferings that are, one would say, these are natural disasters. And then these are things that are caused by human nature in themselves. Suppose you were at Palabura there at the mines, or in Rustenburg somewhere at the mines, and we look for mineral resources, and then we keep on digging the earth underneath and then not putting proper support structures, you know, to hold the earth. Suppose a volcano comes. All of us, because there is disaster, there is death, there is catastrophe, all of us immediately jump into this particular thing that, no, how would God do that? But when you trace this thing, you know, from the beginning, there is human error, you know, involved in it. So natural disasters, some of them are caused by us. Another natural disaster would be, like for instance, you go to the swimming pool up here at SJV. You have never been to any swimming lessons for that matter. And then you decide, you know, you're going to swim, and then you go in there, and then you drown. And all of us immediately saying, oh, James was a good man. How could God kill such a good man? But you can see there is an element that James used his freedom, you know, to swim. But he did not exercise it very well, because he was never aware that he is not able, he's not skilled enough to undertake. And God cannot simply wait in the swimming pool, you know, to hold, you know, a human being like this who takes a risk, like driving a car without brakes. So what we are saying here is that, you know, there are certain sufferings that happen because of human error. And then you were talking at the beginning about wars. You know, we are talking presently about the whole issue of the raging war between Israel and Palestine, Russia and Ukraine, and you have also in the Sudan and also in the Congo, right in our continent, but also in Eswatini not so long, you had conflicts, you know, that actually claimed people. In most of those is human beings using their freedom in such a way that they also do not respect the sacredness of human life, where the human being has also dethroned in a way God and has taken that seat to an extent that, you know, they are sitting at the seat, you know, of judgment, dictating life and all those things. But what that means in actual fact is that the conscience, the human conscience, is not formed, and therefore the human person has actually degraded in their own value system. So there is no fear for life, in a sense of respect for human life. But there is a loss of the sense of the sacred as well, where ultimately we become like everyone for himself and God for us all. And in a situation like ours in our country, where the economy is down, where people are unemployed, where there is a lot of suffering from a point of view of many ways, there is bound to be crime. That kind of crime also impacts on normal human values where people are exploited, you know, where people are actually not respected. Because a young man who is not working today is more or less going to disrespect his grandmother and then exploit her, take money, or the grandfather like that. But it is because of the whole issue that is raging around because of the declining economic, you know, conditions. And one of the things that we can learn about that we had fairly recently, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, was the whole phenomenon of, you know, homophobic attacks, where one would look at as an outsider, says, you know, South Africans are heartless, they are intolerant, and then they do not want to live with others. But historically, when you go down, we have lived with people. Logically, we can't redefine God, because ultimately God is who God is. God defines us. In this country, which came from other countries, and we have never fought with anyone or killed anybody because they are a foreigner. But the crux of the issue is that there are limited resources, there is no work, and actually a situation like that creates also a jungle where there is survival for the fittest. And to an extent that as human beings, we move from being humans, you know, and then we turn into savages because we need to fight for our survival. And in this case, people also become criminals because the option, even if they were qualified, they wouldn't have a job. But even people who are refugees, you know, in our country, who come here because there are no resources, there are no jobs, they themselves also turn into, you know, underhand tactics in order to survive. And then that's obviously going to create a conflict.
Yes, Bishop. I'll just take you back a bit. You spoke about in the beginning, I think, the incarnation, God becoming like us and being fragile. You know, taking the suffering of this world also. Do you think, according to you, that we as human beings, we are becoming more fragile in the sense that we no longer want to suffer. We always want to see ourselves being prosperous, having good things, having good times, you know. But we don't have that part of suffering in us. Do you think that are we becoming more fragile into this life that we are living in?
Or maybe how can we embrace, you know, suffering, you know, this?
Yeah, suffering needs to be looked at, you know, positively as well. I, you know, alluded to the fact that, you know, Christ, the Son of God, became human. Actually, assuming the human condition meant also that to assume the fragility of the human nature. Now, Christ gave us this example that when he was facing the cross, Christ would have chosen at that time when he was to be crucified, he would have, you know, chosen two options: run away, come down from the cross, fight those who had, you know, subjected him to the cross. But he never went for those options, actually, because for Christ, suffering was also an issue of solidarity with the human race. Because sometimes when we suffer graciously and then we suffer also peacefully, we are also doing that in terms of solidarity with other people. We may not experience human suffering in the first instance, but we need to learn to, develop a spirit of solidarity where we can also walk with others, in their own sufferings, in their own challenges, and become people like that. Pope Francis uses this word, accompaniment. He uses this word accompaniment for formation. He uses this word accompaniment, for missionary work. Okay. Because, in the mission, you also find people who are challenged and hurt and wounded by things which they do not understand in their own lives. Take for an example, somebody who had gotten into a married situation and then have lived married life for some time, and then they are wounded by divorce. And here, that is some form of an emotional, kind of suffering, because that has broken family, that has broken their peace, that has broken the unity, of family that they believe. And it is also tempered with the value, that they have as human persons.
And that is getting higher and higher in South Africa.
Yeah, it's getting higher and higher. But what we need to be able to realize that some of the things do happen for a particular reason. Okay. But when they have happened, the difference is we do not judge people, we do not condemn people, but we accompany people so that they can positively also, understand the spirit of suffering. I give you a simple example. Okay. John Paul II, when he was sick and dying, many people lamented the fact that, no, why don't we put him away? Yeah. Why would you bring him out into the public? And then people see that. But the fact was that he showed us the human face of Jesus also, who suffered. And then he was saying, now, with my own personal sufferings, in solidarity with others who are suffering, I am actually offering my own suffering as a source of encouragement for others to be able to carry their own sufferings, but suffer looking at Christ rather than suffer looking at the way out. So, because we have the whole thing, the cross is part of the mystery of our own redemption. Christ would have chosen other ways to show us the depth of his love, but he chose the cross,
the most crucial one,
the most cruel, and then the one that was scandalous, and the one that would have relegated him totally to a thief. Yeah. But yet at the same time, he chose that in order to be able to say to us, when we look at the cross in terms of the category, of redemption, there is light in the cross, because then the cross of Christ illumines the darkness of evil and human sin. Because redemption, freedom is not just only, being freed from all the social oppressive structures. Suppose we were all, freed from all societal oppressive structures, and then we had everything that we wanted. Will we be free? No. In a sense that, out of social freedom also, redemption must come. We must be freed ourselves from human sin that enslaves us, which at times contributes to the social sin, to the breakdown of societal structures, and to lack of justice, because there is no. So the first thing, the cross teaches us that through the cross we are redeemed, made children of God, so that we also behave as such. You had in the scriptures, it often says in the Old Testament, when God said, you know, you are my people and I will be your God. Now, this simply says to you and I, if we are saying that we are God's children and God is our Father, then it means we are children of the kingdom. So how do children of the kingdom behave like? Children of the kingdom behave, you know, peacefully, lovingly, with justice, and treat others with dignity. But also children of the kingdom have what we call an ecological peace, in a sense that, you know, they also respect the rest of creation. They don't move around chasing people with axes. When the people are finished, then they want to cut all the trees. You understand? So that's how we need to learn each day to develop and to grow, you know, into, you know, living our lives in such a way that we truly image the one who has created us. And then I'm going back to the story of redefining. Because sometimes we don't want to be that which God wants us to be. We want to redefine God so that we have God in our own terms. That God no longer defines us as God, that we define him. And it is a good thing. We need to understand God. And then we need to understand the question of human suffering. But we do not do that by actually redefining God. We do that by being defined ourselves by God.
Bishop, let me stop you there, because you know, if it was not Good Friday, I would have possibly have said to you, this is the homily of the week. Of the week, if I may, but I don't want to take you there. I don't want to take you there, Bishop. Gabriel and I are still youngsters, as you see us. You know, we are still handsome. We haven't grown any. You know, but we are not about 2000. No, we are not about 2000. Bishop, you spoke about something which is very crucial. You know, something of dependence and trying to channel what God wants of us. You know, I'm thinking of immediately technology. Gabriel and I are still young. If you can give me your phone now, I'll teach you something new, something you never, you know, seen, and you'll be, you know, perplexed in a way. And also, Bishop, in our days, we see a high, you know, increasing number of AI, you know, artificial intelligence. Bishop, I'm worried. Can the future bring artificial priest? Will you find yourself one day ordaining a robot, for instance? Are we at the brink of being controlled by our own creation? You know, you think of unemployment. I was looking at the videos in the social medias, especially in Europe, Asia. You go to the restaurant, there are robots flying around. They take your order within 15 minutes or even less than that. Your food is ready and stuff. Now I'm thinking about the AI, Gabriel, within the church. Would we find ourselves in the future having AI priests?
Well, you know, to answer that question, we got to go back to the theology of the body of John Paul II. While as a church, we do not want to look at the use of the digital platforms as a threat to evangelization and to, you know, spreading the gospel. We need to accept that the digital platforms are good and are positive, and they can help us to evangelize better, and then they can also help us to reach people, and then they can also help us, you know, to advance the cause, you know, of the gospel and then unite also humanity in terms of promoting the common good.
Okay.
These are all positive values that we need to look at, you know. But we also need to guard against, you know, the excessive use of the media platform to such an extent that we think that, you know, the artificial intelligence comes with a theory which seems to suggest that, you know, robots could actually eventually replace human beings.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be excessive, and it would be something that we need to, you know, avoid at all costs. And I do not see a situation where people who are refugees, you know, in our country who come here because there are no resources, there are no jobs, they themselves also turn into, you know, human beings would be ministered to by, you know, robots and all those things. Because that would mean that humanity would have reached the lowest point, you know, of either laziness or ultra dependency to an extent that humanity simply doesn't want to do anything. But it would also disturb the human person. You know, philosophically, we talk about self-actualization. If you are not doing anything and then with yourself, and then you are not finding yourself valued and useful, then you would end up finding a scenario where the robots are actually fighting with the human person who is frustrated, drunk, and then fed up with the robot, you know. And then you would have a kind of a, you know, a conflict. I don't know what you call that conflict, you know, because it would not be an intelligent, you know, conflict as such, if you want to put it that way. So I do not personally see a scenario where we will be ordaining robots and all those things. But the Holy Father, through the synodal process, has encouraged us also to open up, you know, more access to the use of digital platforms, you know, for evangelization. Why does he want us to do that? Because the Holy Father sees where a situation where science and theology meet, you know, the humanities and theology meet in order to look at the challenges that confronts us, because faith is not lived in isolation. It is lived, you know, in the world where these humanities and scientific explorations are taking place. And then we cannot longer operate, you know, in isolation, theology there and humanities over there. We need to find a point of encounter where we can actually dialogue, where we can study together, but also where we can challenge each other, you know, you know, to move beyond just thinking that if we clone human beings, invent machines, life is gonna be better. The thing that we need to do is to empower a human person so that the human person can be proud and continue to contribute positively. You can imagine if the robots are doing the work and then we are sitting at home, we'll probably be drinking the whole day. And then we might also eventually shoot them because we will feel that, you know, they are doing kind of... The human person was created in the image and likeness of God. And now, sacraments in the church, to come to your question, sacraments in the church at the moment theologically, sacraments are for human beings. You cannot ordain a robot. It's not a human person. And then a machine cannot ultimately also, consecrate the whole thing. It means if humanity is done, is done.
Finished.
The second coming of our Lord Jesus Christ is coming. So we are taken up into heaven, and so on.
Yeah,
but there is a question that you are raising through the question that you have asked, which I think we need to address. The human person has been endowed with intelligence. But is this intelligence just the human intelligence? Does it have boundaries?
I never thought of myself as a philosopher.
Yeah, does it have boundaries? Does it mean that human intelligence can do what it wants?
Yes,
And that's where the critical importance of the theology of the body comes from. What is the body designed for? What did God intend with the creation of the human person? Can a human person manipulate intelligence to such an extent that they destroy even the created reality of God, and then God ceases to be God, and then they create human reality out of their own intelligence? Yeah. We produce guns, we produce all sorts of weapons that are destructive. That is the human mind. But can the human mind actually be restrained? Are there limitations to what one can do with one's intelligence? Or should I even get a bit more further scientific and say, will the human mind at some stage, with the destruction that it does with the extreme, reach a point where it becomes like a virus? A virus mutates and it mutates until the time when it can no longer mutate and that it eventually commits suicide. Will human intelligence, because the human intelligence has to actually image God in terms of working in synchrony to create the kind of harmony, the kind of world, the kind of common good that God had desired from the beginning. But when the human mind goes to extremes and begins now destroying that which God himself has created, it is actually taking the suicidal way.
Gabriel, any insights there?
Yes, Bishop. I think James has opened up the floor to a very crucial topic about technology. And since you know that we are coming from COVID, and I think COVID has opened up the new way also for technology and live streams and watching, having mass, participating in mass while you are at home, sitting at your couch and drinking tea. Do you think, Bishop, that we can be able to navigate God through technology? Like, I'm speaking in terms of, I'm not speaking as a brother or as a priest, but I'm speaking as someone who's sitting at home as a Christian. Do you think they can find God using the technology? Do we see the necessity? Do we see the importance of going to church? Or can we just Google something and find the spiritual upliftments that we want instead of going to church?
Maybe Bishop, on that point, there are people also, at home, they would say that they are not religious, but spiritual, maybe if the bishop can allude on those.
Yeah, technology was very helpful to us during the time of COVID in terms of connecting people with the divine and all those. Yet at the same time, when we look at how far we can reach people, in terms of technology, the argument that I have presented still is valid. Does, technology allow us to relate as human beings? Remember that in terms of Lumen Gentium number 1, that, you know, the church is, it's a community, you know, that is created, you know, to gather people into itself for the purposes of salvation. That means that God himself being a community, God is a relationship. God wanted human beings also to have human relations and then to interact with one another and so on. The Trinity being, you know, a community that relates. And if we are created in the image and likeness of God, and then we bear his imprints, therefore, having human relations is not an afterthought. It is something that is built in our own nature. We are not saved individually. We are also saved both as individuals but also as community. And therefore, it is important that, you know, technology does not really, you know, replace, you know, the place of God, the place of interaction, the place of human relationships. Because even within the family itself, once in the family there are no relations, the family itself is destroyed, it dies, because human relationships have failed. That's where sometimes you would have divorce, that's where sometimes you would have misunderstanding, you would have suffering at the family level, because there are no human relations. The common good has been destroyed. There is no praying together. There is no eating together. There is not sharing, you know, and all those. So in a nutshell, it's okay when people are impeded, like people who cannot go to church, you know, to have, yeah, but we will not reach a situation where by people, a priest will just celebrate mass and people will connect online and have spiritual communion. Because the fact is that God, the Eucharist in its own nature, we go back to the whole way of the consecration. And then, even when he instituted the Eucharist, after the institution, Christ said what? Take and eat. You know, take and eat. That implies, you know, a relationship. And it's not a meal of an individual. It's the Eucharist is the sacrament of unity, in a sense that it unites us so that we do not grow in selfishness, we do not grow in individualism, and also that we do not pretend that, you know, we can access God. You know, we don't have to go to church. Because when we no longer go to church, we must ask ourselves, what is the relationship between the church itself? What is the purpose of the church? The church is an instrument of the kingdom. It gathers people into herself so that, you know, those who are gathered into this may also go into, you know, the world and transform the whole world into the kingdom of God. And then the church also becomes a vehicle and a source of encounter with God. So the church is not just an irrelevant, you know, structure that has no purpose. You know, because if we do not have the church, we don't have the mission. There is no need for us also to have the Eucharist and priest. You know, all those things are tied together, you know, on the plan of God, who wants to save people and then who wants to save them within the same. Because all the sacraments are instituted by Christ so that he can encounter, you know, human beings through them. So a question is, can you have confession online? No, there is no encounter. Can you have the Eucharist online? So even during the COVID, people went, you know, they connected online, but they didn't really encounter Christ physically. Now, to your question, is God bound by the sacraments? No, God is not bound by the sacraments. God can ultimately save his own people the way that he wants and through any means, that he has created. But now that God has created the sacraments, God has created the ordinary way that he wants his own people to be saved. The other one is the extraordinary way that is left to God's judgment and God's. So for me, it's the risky way.
Bishop, we'll go back to that community, the role of community. I just want to remind our viewers at home that we are with Bishop Slumela, our former rector here. This is our very first podcast this year, 2024, with His Excellency, our former rector here. We are discussing a very crucial topic, redefining God. And so far, Bishop Slumela has hammered us. We thought that, Bishop, today we will be hammering you with all the theology that you have taught us. But it seems like it's not working at the moment. Hence, I said to you, to become a bishop, it seems like, you get some powers which nobody can,
The robots are actually fighting with the human person who is frustrated,
ladies and
drunk,
in the future we will have
and then fed up with the robot,
questions online. We will give you we are in the process of redefining our studio. You can call us, you can follow us on social media and ask them, post your questions there or comment on the time frame there. We will have that in the future, but because now we are with His Excellency hammering us. Bishop, let's go back to the community, the role of community. I want us. You spoke about it at Christmas in the aspect of a society. For instance, when you gave your beautiful homily there, the role of the society and that we cannot live, as an island. We need each other in some aspects of life. If I can take you back to that, Bishop, for someone who was not at Christmas this year, for someone who won't be able to access your homily, as you said that it was posted by the SACBC today, the role of community, and I want to indulge there with dialogue. How important is that, Bishop, and how can we have these means to combine both community and dialogue, which I think it might be something in the future that can help us, to maybe to redefine ourselves instead of redefining God. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at one of the topics that were given, by the Holy Father for the Synod, and even the way the Synod is carried out, and the whole issue of the conversation in the Spirit, which is the method that was developed, at the Synod to allow people to sit around the table. As I said in my homily, that the kind of church that we are creating is a church where people feel at home, where the voiceless have a voice, where everyone is given a chance, to be heard, when we can talk and also discern together and also make, make a contribution to the mission of the church together. As priests, we are called at all times to be community builders, because we build community by actually dialoguing with people. The dialogue allows us also to let go of our own prejudices, to let go of our own misconceptions, and then to also part away with misinformation that would not be part of it. A journey of people who want to build community. Now, if you look, this is not something that comes with Christianity itself. It is actually deeply rooted in the African traditions, where community life is the basic cell of, community living. We do things in community. When there is a funeral, we all contribute something to make that there is. When there is a feast, we all contribute with that. And that in itself is a richness that even if we were to do inculturation, this is something that we need to take with. Because even when the synod comes, it comes at a time where we are challenged also to look at issues within our own cultures, our own environment, and within our own Christian practice, where, obstacles of community living, community buildings, is found. And so that we let go of those. We belong together. We must listen to one another. Nobody has answers. Dialogue simply means that, you are not eager to talk. It means you are eager to listen and then to hear what, others is. If you look at my motto, in my motto there is a baobab tree.
Yes.
There. The baobab tree is one of the ancient, African trees. It's found in, southern Africa, but also in other parts of Africa. Now, that tree used to grow into a bigger tree to an extent that it created a shelter when it became a big, it's like somebody kind of carved, a cave into. And this is where actually men would sit in there to be able to dialogue and then deal with major issues that were solving, that were facing their own communities. And then actually community building, needs us to do that. And we are doing that with the small Christian communities and all those things. But this is a value that we do not have to throw away. We need to realize that dialogue makes us come together as people, but dialogue also makes us to be able to reach out to others. We can walk with other churches. We can work with others in society that are building society. We can find other people who are working on the principle of building the common good in society. And together with these, we can actually, communicate a sign of which is primarily a witness. That, the gospel has said that they are Christians. You will know them by what? By the fruits of their own love. So we are called, to dialogue. And Pope Francis has said this in Fratelli Tutti, that if we want to build dialogue, we have to start with dialogue of brotherhood. Let us start where we are, dialogue of brotherhood and sisterhood. And because once we take each other from where we are, we can talk about other things like doctrine and the other things. But the first thing that we must agree that we are all human. We are bound together by values, common values, that makes us build a society that we want, a society that is peaceful, a society that guarantees a future for our children, a society that does not breed criminals and corrupt people, a society that builds people who are actually steeped in their own values, a society that looks at life as sacred and life as meaningful. And that's what we want to pass to our own children. You don't want to corrupt your own children with things that are not working now. In other words, corruption cannot be passed on. You cannot talk about corruption as part of tradition. We pass on living things that would make our own society live. Those ones that are actually not living, we have to let go of them.
Yes, Bishop. I think you kind of like answered a bit my question, but I wanted to ask about you spoken about the tradition.
Yeah.
How communication or dialogue is also found in our traditions. My question is, we know that we are living in the community or in the society where the youth are speaking, but they are not being listened. You know. So how do we, as the church, help the youth to have a voice in the community, also in the church? Because as we speak, you speak about the communication, the dialogue that we have to have, and even the synod also. You know, that the synod is giving the opportunity for us as the Christian to communicate, to participate. So how's the youth, how is the church helping the youth to dialogue and to participate in the growth of the church and also in the society that we live in?
Yeah, if we go back to the synod again, the synod gave us a method which is called conversation in the spirit, which this method can be used with any group, the youth, the elders, women, and all those. It's a method that is fairly simple, which creates an atmosphere where people can reflect about their own needs. Of course, they are usually given questions before to reflect, upon. Suppose you want to engage the youth, you have to create a forum also where you can encounter the youth. Sometimes we have the temptation to speak for the youth and have answers for them. But we need to create that forum. I was chaplain myself for the youth, for a long time. And over the years that I worked with young people, I saw, young people growing more and more. But because I would sit with them, plan with them, and also ask them what are their needs. We don't always have to agree with them, but we always have to carry their own contribution, because youth have got a mission within the church. We need to listen to them and then also make them also to be drivers of their own mission. We have to empower youth by actually educating them, first of all, in the faith, giving them proper formation in the things of the faith, but then allow them to minister to each other. Because we have the temptation that the youth must come with a question, we must give them. That's not how you actually animate young people. You sit with them, you create a forum. And what are these forums for the empowerment and education of the youth? You will have workshops where you address issues that, come out of forums of young people. But you would also have retreat days where you help young people to pray. You would also have formation meetings where you teach young people about their faith. How did John Paul II attract so many people? As an old man. Yeah, an old man of 80-something, but wherever he went, youth gathered there. But because he spoke their language, but because he challenged them, but also because he created situation. If any of you have been to the World Youth Day, you will see the formation that is there. You will see also the prayer that is there, but you will also see the youth empowerment. And this is what we should bring home, to our youth here. Create forums where we can. Youth are not very easy. You have to move them both by creating these forums. Where are these forums? You have groups in the church, but you must also create digital platforms, because you are going to get many young people there. Like, for instance, I haven't seen now. I'll be happy to see a kind of a digital a platform where youth meet once a month, where any youth who is interested can log in, and there would be all these things, topics are discussed, and then there is an interaction with young people. But mainly topics that touch the life of young people, because we need to know what they think, but we also need to have the courage to say, what they are thinking is good, but is not permanent also. Because we listen to the youth, they are not dictating to us. We listen to them, we dialogue with them. We will tell them also when we agree with them and when we don't.
I think we are running out of time. Otherwise, Bishop, we have a book of questions for you. I'm sure this is the first time you come for this podcast, but I can assure you this is not the last time. We will please respond to our calls in the future. I know you are very busy, and understandably so. Just a sum-up question, Bishop, before we close now. Don't you miss us in the seminar, Bishop?
Well, I've been here for 12 years. And,
so you don't miss us.
And to say that I don't miss you and the seminary would not be the representation of the truth. This place still is very special in my heart. You see me now and then here. And then I have also responded to this because I also feel that it is our task and our role in evangelization to empower people and also to form them through these digital, platforms. So in short, yes, I do miss you, but I have been given another responsibility. I also have to cut the umbilical cord.
No, thank you, Bishop, for responding to our request, and thank you, our viewers, for listening to us and reaching this moment when we end our podcast.
Before you end, I'm sorry to disturb. I want to teach the Bishop something before we close. So the response, Bishop, will be, we are feeling scrumptious today. Please repeat after me. We are feeling scrumptious today. So all of us are looking at the camera. So I will be saying, Kondizima Genge.
We are feeling scrumptious today.
Thank you very much, Bishop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good. Thank you very much, and thank you for this initiative. I think a whole